There's two reasons why I fell in love with the street photography thing, right? Well, multiple reasons, but the one reason is that dramatic aspect. If I can learn to capture the real true drama on the go, on the fly, with whatever the universe is throwing at me of whatever city I'm in, that's only gonna make me a tenfold times better cinematographer when I'm given a script, when everything is preconceived, the drama is already there on the page. Everything I do is just trying to be a better filmmaker. A lot of people don't see the correlation between street photography and filmmaking, or street photography and cinematography. I know for a fact it's already influenced the way I film something. Just a few years I've been practicing street photography, it's already influenced me. Again, 24 frames in a second, right? One frame, ba, 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 ba. That's all filmmaking is, a series of frames.
Like your TV show, what is it called?
DOGTIMES. We're out here in the Windy City, Chicago. If you guys don't know by now, I've been on the road for 2 months. I've been just traveling the country in this old RV, 1996 Ford Coachman Catalina Sport. We're currently in the boneyard out here. I really just wanted to see the country, see the land. My mom bought a big fifth wheel back in the early 2000s, and then she got cancer and it did her in. So she was never really able to fully do everything she wanted to do in that fifth wheel. So, you know, I'm getting up there and I thought, you know what, my wife and I, we don't have children, you know, nothing's locking us down. I figured we could just go see the country a little bit. And I'm obsessed with Robert Frank's The Americans, and I thought, hey man, I want to do that too. So that's what's been going on. We're going to start eventually putting out episodes about some of the places that we go and some of the events that I've been covering with street photography and things like that. We're going to have a brand new separate documentary channel called Local Calls. So that's on YouTube and Instagram at Local Calls Photo. But the whole thing I wanted to talk about today is Garry Winogrand.
In the end of the picture, right. Not how I do anything. Maybe the language would be how the fact of putting four edges around a collection of information or facts transforms them. Mm-hmm. You know, the photograph is not what was photographed, it's something else.
If you guys don't know about him, you should. And if you mainly are on this channel for cinematography or videography, thank you for subscribing and supporting the show. And I know some of you guys get annoyed whenever I do a video on street photography. There is a huge correlation there. A camera operator is a camera operator is a camera operator. A true image maker is a true image maker. And an artist is an artist is an artist. That's what I love about Garry Winogrand. He was an amazing street photographer. The guy shot dozens of rolls of black and white film on a daily basis. We all know the story, you know, when he died, they found tons of undeveloped rolls in his apartment. We're going to watch some snippets of a couple of his interviews today, and I'm gonna share my thoughts and ideas on it. And I think it applies to not only street photographers, and not only all photographers, but it also applies to cinematographers, videographers, whatever world of image making you're in. And the main thing we're gonna focus on is camera operation and what he talks about, the photographer versus the illustrator. And that's huge. And when you first hear that, like I did, it took me quite a little bit of time to wrap my mind around what he was actually talking about. So one of these snippets is when he was doing a talk at Rice University back in 1977, where he talks about finding the drama.
You know, when you photograph something beautiful, how do you make a photograph that's more beautiful than what was photographed? That's really our problem in the end. In the end, the word dramatic has to apply. It's always about that. Is the photograph more dramatic than what was photographed? It has to be.
And some of the kids ask him, like, well, you know, they're like, what could it be this? What could it be another word? And he goes, no. Drama is the best word to call it. It has to be dramatic. And in our world, coming from the world of cinematography, filmmakers, well, if you ask me, drama is directly related to cinema or cinematic, right? The cliche word cinematic. Well, what makes it cinematic? It's dramatic. It's the drama of the nature of whatever you're doing. But that word dramatic, let's look it up. Of an event or circumstance that is sudden and striking. Robert Frank's The Americans, it heavily influenced the look of David Fincher's Seven, shot by Darius Khondji. I'm gonna leave a link to that down in the description below. You should check that out. Robert Frank, while he was shooting The Americans, world famous street photography book from the 50s, he got a Guggenheim Fellowship and traveled the country. And he had two main elements that he was looking for in every photograph while he traveled across America making that book. Two main elements that every photo must have. Humanity and the extraordinary. What humanity tells me is, oh, there's got to be a human in the shot then. The extraordinary, that's where that drama comes in. Well, in the world of cinematography, in the world of filmmaking, that's easy, right? You have the script is given to you. Well, there's your drama. But in the world of just photography, you got to create the drama. And according to Winogrand, the photograph needs to be more dramatic than the actual event that was being captured. How do you put all these different elements that usually don't go together, put them together within four corners? It's our job as the image maker to make the photograph more dramatic than what was actually captured.
You buy photography annual, buy all those annuals, color annuals, and you can see all the SLR pictures. They're always done with big lenses, and there's a big blob of something out of focus, a big blob of color out of focus, and something's in focus. The fact is, you look at those viewfinders, they're not photographic tools. They're illustration tools, and they force the operator, I won't even use the word photographer, to design and make a picture. In the end, make basically an illustration. They're not photographic tools, generally speaking. And I defy you to resist how what you see in that viewfinder will manipulate you. And it will manipulate you into designing a picture.
There's a difference between a photographer or a cinematographer and an illustrator. Now, he's doing this talk in 1977. So this is before our digital age, right? Back then, the modern technology was the single lens reflex camera. What did the difference between a single lens reflex versus something like a Leica rangefinder have? Well, the single lens reflex now allowed the photographers to see the depth of field live as it's happening. But Winogrand is talking about how that is manipulating the image that you're capturing. Nowadays, in our modern day of cinematography and photography, all we're doing is looking at screens. So now we get to see way more than what the depth of field is doing. Now we're seeing what the exposure is doing. Because now AI is the new illustrator, just straight up. The modern technology, I mean, think about any film set that you've been on, no matter how big or small, everyone is gathered around a monitor. Everyone is being heavily influenced by what they're seeing on that monitor. That monitor is manipulating the image that is being captured. Versus when you're on a rangefinder, all you get is little four corners. You have to know the exposure in your head. You have to know what the depth of field based upon the focal length they're shooting on is going to look like. You gotta be able to pre-visualize all of that stuff. White balance, everything has to be pre-visualized. He's talking about more than just photographer versus illustrator. What he's talking about is true artistry. Because what does that involve? The true artistry involves 100% knowing your craft, not being influenced by any modern technology. Because this is what I was talking about of why I ditched the Sony RX1R2 for the M10, right? And this is the M6, but I have both. I have slowly become a Leica fanboy, but not really a Leica fanboy, a rangefinder fanboy. And this is why, because of what Winogrand is talking about. You know, when I first did my big review of the Leica M8 a couple years ago, I was talking about how the rangefinder will reveal how shitty of an image maker I am, or you are, because it will, because you can't have anything to rely on. Now you really do have to train yourself. Now you will learn how to be a real photographer. And I think that's why people say, oh yeah, the Leica will make you a better photographer. I don't know if it's making you a better photographer, but it's teaching you how to be a true image maker and not an illustrator that is being influenced by the machine. And this is like what I just told my Patreon earlier today, is that think about it like this. If you can't wrap your mind around this, if you're not able to accept this, wrap your mind around this, right? Think about a painter or a sculptor. Or what do they start with? Well, a painter starts with a blank canvas and a sculptor starts with a ball of clay. Now, if they were going to be influenced by technology, the way that photographers and cinematographers are influenced by technology, a painter might walk in and already have someone already went in there and did a rendering, a quick sketch for him. Now he's just got to do paint by numbers. Or a sculptor, he might have a 3D print, right, of the frame of what he's sculpting. Now he just has to mold around that. Now, would you argue, hey, that's not a real painter, that's not a real sculptor? But if they were to start with a true blank canvas, or start with a true ball of clay with nothing, and they built something amazing, or they painted something amazing out of that you would say, oh yeah, that's a real sculptor, that's a real painter. But how come people aren't saying that about cinematographers and photographers when we're being heavily influenced by the machine? Everything we do is being, and they say, well, nah, it's a convenience, man. We need that, right? And I'll agree with that. It is a huge convenience. But where do you draw the line? And this is what Winogrand is talking about. These are tools. These tools are making you an illustrator because you're being influenced by these modern photographic cinematography tools. That's fine, we all need tools. But wouldn't it be amazing to learn the art first Before we lean into the tools, think about Roger Deakins with his Byways book, the solid black and white images. Probably a good hand of them, probably taken on a rangefinder camera. I don't know, I just say that. But definitely non-digital cameras, non-modern cameras. And I would argue that Sir Roger Deakins is a true master of our craft, because he is. The man has been knighted, for Christ's sake. So how do we expect to rise to that caliber if we don't know how to look through a window with 4 little frames and pre-visualize the exposure, pre-visualize the depth of field, pre-visualize the friggin' focal length for that matter, pre-visualize everything, even what the image is actually gonna look like, right? Because if I look through a rangefinder, all I see is what I see in the world. The image, the dramatic image that I'm trying to capture, hopefully, the specs are not gonna make the image. They're just not. You, the artist, is going to make the image. So what we should be more obsessed with is the user experience of the tool that we're using, of the camera that we're using, that we choose to use. I don't know why we're obsessing about specs. We should be obsessing about how the camera makes us feel when it's in our hands. Does it inspire us in any way? No digital camera inspires me the way like the Leica M6 or the Leica M10 inspires me.
Yeah, you have to be your own toughest critic. And you only learn that from work, from seeing work. Let's call it intelligent work. We all have limitations. At any given time, we're limited. Let's say you can only learn from what you can understand at a given time. Hopefully, you learn something so you understand more. And on that level, you're a critic. You're your own critic.
We can't label ourselves artists, right? It's the audience's job to do that. If we ever even get the pleasure of having an audience for the work we're creating, it's up to the audience to decide if what we're creating is art, therefore making us an artist. That's the way I was taught, though. I was taught that in film school. And this applies to all fields and industries. I don't care what you do. If you're applauding your own, it's okay to feel good about what you're doing. But if you can't find a single flaw in anything you're doing, there's something wrong there. There's a red flag there, I believe. Because there's always room for improvement. Always. It doesn't matter. And if you don't have the ability to find the areas of improvement in the work you're doing, there's no room there for you to evolve. There's just not. Because just like Winogrand is talking about, the only way to grow and build your skill set and evolve as a creator or an artist or whatever field you're in, the only way to do that is to be able to identify areas you can improve in the work that you're doing. So that's why it's so important to be our own toughest critic, especially in this world, this field of cinematography, videography, photography, whatever image making you're doing. There's some stuff in here that I couldn't find the soundbite on, but there is a moment where he talks about the ability to be anonymous in bigger cities. And this may apply specifically to just street photography, but even if you're a documentary filmmaker and you got to run out there and just film some stuff on the streets, you know what's funny? I've been a camera operator on a fair share of documentaries, but I have no problem running around on any street corner in any city, no matter how big or small, with a big cinema camera and just shooting strangers. It doesn't bother me. But you put me out there with a little Leica rangefinder just doing photography, and now I'm a little bit nervous. And I think it's just because you get the luxury of when you're on a documentary, you got a big, huge, long lens, and you're like, yeah. And plus, too, something happens psychologically to people when they see a big camera. Some people think like, oh, what are they doing? Yeah, I want to be in the movie, I want to be in the TV. Or if they do see it, they just kind of detour their way out of the frame themselves. Nobody really bothers you when you're out there with a big camera shooting video. But I've gotten a lot of heat. And some of you have seen some of my street photo videos where, specifically the Venice one, Venice, California, I ran around there at the M8 at one point. Almost daily I get someone yelling at me. But I mean, I'm shooting on 35mm lens, shooting on a 28mm lens. And I like to get, I'm trying to build some drama in the shot. I want to try to get as close as possible as I can. Maybe that has a lot to do with it, but also I'm only 5'10". I'm very scrawny. I'm not an intimidating guy either, right? So I feel like some people feel that, they have no problem approaching me, getting in my face, right? They're not scared of me. I don't know what it is. But maybe it's also because they can feel a little bit of that own nervous energy. But there is something to be said about having the ability to be anonymous in the bigger cities. The bigger the city is, the more street culture is there, the more people are there, and the more anonymous you can be. LA, you can't, and even Winogrand talks about this, even in LA, you can't be that anonymous out on the streets in LA. It doesn't have the street culture that a big city like New York has. It just doesn't exist in LA. And it was even like that when Winogrand was there in the 70s. And he talks about it in documentaries.
Well, that's what puns do. You know what? You don't laugh at what's funny about a pun? You don't really laugh because there's anything funny. You laugh because you realize you're not getting killed. You know, basically, a pun profoundly upsets you. Language is basically existent, and a pun calls into question what you think, what you believe a word means. And you're profoundly upset when you realize you're not getting killed. You laugh out of relief. That's what really happens.
In other words, it's like we all expect certain things to be a certain way, or how we would expect things to go when we look at something, or when you watch an event unfold, or whatever. We all have these preconceived notions or ideas or expectations. And that's what he's talking about, puns kind of, you know, it's making you be aware of the reality that, you know, something can be different than what you think you know. And the more interesting you can capture moments like that, that kind of defy the normalcy of what we're all used to, I think that's really what separates the goats from, you know, just everyday whatever. And something else that I wish I could find the soundbite on, but I just can't find. I don't know what doc or interview it was in. There was a moment where Winogrand was talking about how he had to learn to stop flinching and start making the photograph. Because, you know, I find that all the time when I'm out and about, and I love working a good event, you know. There's something that happened, oh, someone says something loud, or someone yells, or hey, or something, and you just react to it, because that's human nature, that's what we do. Winogrand called it flinching. I mean, I guess that's what you're doing, you're flinching, but you're just reacting. We're reactionary. For every action, there's a reaction. That's just life. But what we have to get really skilled at as street photographers, or even a documentary filmmaker, is that moment when we're flinching or reacting. That's what we should be capturing. And that's just a muscle you have to acquire and build over time. And that requires you to always have it ready to go. The camera, obviously. Because a flinch is like a millisecond of time. And then that moment is gone forever. The universe will never reproduce that for you. Documentary filmmakers, street photographers, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, that's enough. We're about to get blown away out here. I hope this was beneficial for you. I hope this was somewhat entertaining for you. And I hope you were able to walk away with something new for your back pocket today. And if you're new here, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel and join us for this crazy ride that we're on. Till next time, folks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You mean you don't want to make choices?
Oh, that I never do. all I do is say yes. That's
Big Southwest plane. Let's hope it's not a Boeing. Might fall down on my head. Might get hit with an engine part. Oh, God, fucking Boeing, man.